Well, good evening. I am so pleased to be here in this ballroom in Hong Kong. It is fantastic. You know, it was just 2 years ago, Deanna and I did a 14-day quarantine. Last year we did 21 days. You remember those good old days? This year we missed our third quarantine this year, and even though we've been away for a while, every time Deanna and I land here, we really feel like Hong Kong is home. This is where we feel. So at any rate, part of me also wishes I could be in Manila as well. I mean, look at that ballroom. So that's fantastic. There's 50-some tables there. So some of our dearest friends are at the Shang at the Fort tonight. And I also want to say good morning to the Abelotes and to Dale that have a breakfast gathering in D.C. and David Jones, Andy, John in New Jersey. I hope you guys have a great day on the golf course after we get done here. We also have a few crazies that are watching live at 5:30 a.m. in California and in Seattle. We have Malcolm. It's way past his bedtime at 11:30 p.m. in Sydney. Last year, we had nearly 2,000 people watching from 20 different countries. So to all of you, we want to say welcome. So this banquet is the highlight of my year. I know it shouldn't be. I know it probably should be Christmas with the family or my wedding anniversary, but I'm a weird guy. This really is. This is my favorite. This is what I love. A good friend and board member, Dennis Monacelli, he says this. He says, we should all strive to live at the intersection of what you're good at and what breaks your heart. So for me, what breaks my heart is poverty. I think that billions of people live in our world in conditions that no human being should be forced to endure. 25 years ago, Deanna and I moved to Asia to be involved in poverty reduction. We came across this tiny organization called International Care Ministries, and so we traveled to the Philippines, and what we saw there, it broke our hearts. Over the years, many of you have traveled with us to the Philippine communities, and many of you have had your own hearts broken a little bit. And you've prayed for us, you've given us advice, you've supported us financially. So tonight, I would like to have you, the ICM community, to help give the keynote with me. So together, let's just talk about ICM's focus.
First thing is ICM's focus on not just the Philippines, but the ultra poor.
If you just walk into a slum as a Western person or even a more affluent Filipino, I mean, it's hard to sort out where the real need is. It all looks like there's need, but there's levels of need.
There are Filipinos, millions of Filipinos who live on 50 cents a day.
What drew us to ICM in the beginning was really the heart for doing something for the poorest of the poor who seem to be pretty ignored in many ways.
The people you're reaching are otherwise unreachable and are some of the poorest people in the world. It's amazing to be able to give towards helping people who really need it.
So as Hanky said, ICM's sole focus is the ultra poor, those who live on less than 50 US cents per person per day. But when you say that phrase, they live on a certain amount per day, it's a little bit misleading because it kind of makes it sound like that small amount of income is predictable. It happens every day, but it's not. For the poor people, some days are better, and for the poor people, some days are terrible. So to solve any problem, first you have to understand it. So a few of us, we decided to go talk to several poor families about their daily income and expenses. And for me, even after a couple of decades of work with ICM, that experience of talking to those poor people, it really impacted me. So tonight, let me describe to you 3 days from one of the families we visited. Undoctored, this is what happened. Elma, she lives with 3 grandchildren. She earns money by either babysitting or laundry. Neither one of those jobs is regular. So when we visited her on a Sunday morning, Elma had a backlog of 2.5 kilos, 5 pounds of uncooked rice that was set aside for future meals. And she had $3 that she had earned from babysitting the day before. And so that Sunday morning, that cash, those rice, those were her only assets. For Sunday breakfast, they cooked half a kilo of rice. They bought 3 eggs for the 3 children for 50 US cents. She said she couldn't afford an egg for herself. 10 cents for cooking oil, 60 cents for fortified milk powder for the children, and coffee for 20 cents. And that is their breakfast. They had $1.50 remaining, so Sunday morning, Elma went to church and she put 40 US cents in the church offering. Wow. It's really like the widow's mite, isn't it? The whole family ate for lunch for free at the church. Later, they spent 60 cents for drinking water, which would last a few days. The 60 cents for the kids to buy some snack. When they got to the late afternoon on Sunday, the family's whole assets was 2 U.S. cents, 1 peso. Fortunately, one of the grandchildren earned 50 cents helping a neighbor to fetch water, so they cooked another half kilo of their saved rice. They bought a little bit of fried fish, cooking oil, and that is their family's entire consumption for Sunday. That's not a lot of food for 4 people. But Elma, she says, that is a pretty standard day. That is a normal day for her. The next day, Monday, was not a good day. That was a bad day. There was no work for Elma, so their starting assets was just a little bit of rice and a single peso. So in the morning, she borrowed 10 U.S. cents from her neighbor to buy cooking oil. For breakfast, they cooked a half a kilo of their rice. For lunch, they did the same. For dinner, they used their very last half kilo of rice. And Elma's son gave them a little bit of processed meat, so there'd be a tiny bit of protein for the kids, and that was their entire day's consumption, a lot less than the day before. So by the end of Monday, they had no rice and a single peso. But Tuesday turned out to be better. It started when Elma received $4 US from the local government. She then purchased 3 hard-boiled eggs, 5 small buns, cooked noodles, fortified milk powder, and her coffee. And at lunchtime, Elma's daughter arrived from out of town, and her daughter brought 5 kilos of rice. So for lunch, they cooked a kilo of that rice, and they needed more than a half a kilo because 7 of them were eating instead of 4. And then her daughter brought some fresh fish for dinner, another kilo of rice. They spent $2 on fresh fish. She borrowed 30 cents from her daughter for condiments, and that was their daily consumption. So Tuesday was a big income day for their family. It was a good day. They got extra cash from the government. They got rice and fresh fish from the daughter, but they still finished that good day with a single pesos and 3 kilos of rice. So you've seen a good day, you've seen a bad day, and you've seen a regular day. Where does that leave them? At the end of those 3 days, it is not clear whether Elma is going to have any work the next day. She has to figure it out every day, one day at a time. Sobering, isn't it? Consider what the family did not consume. They did not consume any fruit and vegetables. They had very little protein. School needs, electricity, hygiene products, transportation, nothing for medical or anything else. The family has 0 savings. Just imagine. I would sometimes, as I was talking to these families, I would ask them to plan, how are they going to get through the next few days? And often, it was an honest, innocent question, they would often tear up. And I realized how much trauma is in their daily lives. This is ultra poverty. That is what they do every day. It is unimaginable. And Elma is not alone. There are 7 million Filipinos living in ultra poverty. And it breaks my heart. So applying Dennis's formula, I found out what breaks my heart. The other part is, what am I good at? And I feel blessed with insights around strategy and scale, and I feel that that's what's needed here. Solutions to difficult problems like this require innovation.
The Philippines is a unique entity in that there are so many churches throughout all these villages, right? And to be able to use that system from a very logistical, strategic standpoint to work through these neighborhoods.
I think that the genius of ICM, if I can put it that way, in terms of partnering with people that already live in the community, the pastors are already trusted, they're there, they have community, they have relationships.
They know the daily struggles. They understand the daily struggles of the people in the communities.
So it's just not, okay, we do it here for a week, a month, or a year, but it's a long-term commitment.
And I think once you see the impact of these programs, it really makes you wonder why more and more people aren't aware of these programs.
Particularly the Transform program. It's unlike any other that I've seen across the world.
You know, I hope over the next 10 years we can help eliminate a lot of the ultra poverty in these areas. It's really ridiculous, like how difficult life is for some of these people. And I think if you obviously want to help them now, but if you teach them to do small businesses, if you give them access to education, hopefully these areas are able to lift themselves up with some extra help and not have the same ultra poverty that we have today.
Well, Transform is ICM's model to reach the ultra poor. We work through a network of 16,000 active churches across most remote communities in the Philippines, and 3 times every year we ask 500 of those local pastors to host a Transform program in their church. And for each one that agrees to do that, once a week, that pastor gathers the 30 poorest people into their church for a 2-hour session in values, health, and livelihood. And at the end of only 4 months, those who start the program in ultra poverty increase their income by 107%. There's a 36% reduction in illness, a 16% increase in satisfaction with family life, and score of other life improvements. And we're able to keep this transform strategy efficient. We aim to limit the fully loaded cost of the entire 4-month program to $10 US per family member. That's not $10 a month that you pay every month or $10 a year. It is $10 period. Transform is ICM's signature strategy. Virtually everything we do is built around that Transform program. We've now graduated more than 1.6 million family members through Transform. We're on track to reach a couple of million in the next couple of years. So that's pretty amazing, I think. So what does that look like in action? This is the island of Negros, where ICM started 30 years ago. And if we go closer to this community, this is the local pastor, Anselmo. He leads a small church in the hills of Sipley. 5,000 people live in this barangay. Back in 2015, the pastor applied for his very first Transform program, and 4 months later, 37 families had started a savings group, and that first group now has 78 members, and that first group has been recognized by the Department of Labor. So the pastor wanted to help even more people, so he decided to go down the road, and he started in the next neighborhood, did the Transform program again, and every year since then, the pastor has hosted a new group of ultra-poor families. Today, each one of those 8 groups continues to meet. They've helped each other through overcome medical crises, typhoons, the pandemic. 417 members have saved $27,000 US of their own money from people that earn 50 cents a day. And they've invested their money wisely. Maricon put down a down payment on a motorbike so that they could make deliveries for their business. Evelyn rebuilt her walls after a recent typhoon. Vilma invested in a new roof. Rubelin is raising pigs. Griselda was able to invest $160 in a water pump so they didn't have to walk so far to get water. The Ephesians Savings Group sells cleaning products. Estrella sells rice for a group store. And Gina was able to enroll her daughter in college, and her daughter is now an honor student. So if you decide to sponsor a Transform program, you're reaching a community just like this, sustaining impact for hundreds of families, and that is just one community, just one dot on the map. We have achieved scale together, and countless lives have been changed. So this year marks ICM's 30th anniversary, but it's also a milestone for Deanna and I. We arrived in Hong Kong just over 25 years ago. I have no idea how that happened, but within just a few years, I became Chief Financial Officer at Morgan Stanley, and for all of Asia Pacific, I was overseeing the financial affairs of a multi-billion-dollar business, but almost immediately during that time, I was working for Morgan Stanley. I also was engaged with ICM on the side. And 10 years ago, I left Morgan Stanley to join ICM full-time. So last week, I met up with a few of the people that I used to lead at Morgan Stanley. And I talked to them about how their careers have developed. They're doing really well, and I am proud of them. But I got to say, in those conversations, I began to realize how much money I personally had left behind when I left business. And I've spent the last 10 years of my life in a nonprofit when I'm kind of at the height of the potential to earn income for business, and I found myself wondering, well, was it really worth it? Well, honestly, I didn't hesitate very long because I knew it was worth it. I feel gratified because I feel that I'm living at that intersection of what I'm good at and what breaks my heart. And after decades of hard work by an army of people and undeserved blessings from God, I feel that ICM is in the precipice of the next level of impact.
One thing that's, I think, unique about ICM especially is how oriented they are on data, targets, results, impact. Those things do matter.
I was so impressed to meet an organisation that was so committed to testing and evaluating and continually developing and adapting the work that it was doing.
The leadership have such a desire for all their work to be backed up by great data and research.
And the external validation of their data and working with great universities and other organisations to test the impact of what they are doing. I think that's really key to us.
I am very confident that if you spend $1, that dollar is going in the right direction.
So ICM is now in year 3 of a 5-year partnership with the Global Innovation Fund. The Global Innovation Fund was created by most of the large governments around the world, and GIF's job is to find the most innovative solutions to poverty around the world and help those solutions reach scale. So ICM has now received thousands of grant applications every year, and GIF says that they're only able to award a half a dozen partnerships out of those thousands of applications. And GIF chose ICM to be one of their exclusive partners because they believe that ICM has a unique distribution strategy that can help relieve poverty around the world. And we're now innovating on strategies that have a measurable impact on the poor people we serve, but we're also able to influence how other charities around the world are responding to poverty. So let me give you a few examples of how we'll be able to manage that. ICM has always been focused on improving livelihoods. There are so many innovations through the years. ICM's Prevail network has nearly 3,000 savings groups, serving 100,000 families. These groups have saved $5 million of their own money. The Savings Group Network is now one of the top 12 largest savings groups in the world, and we are one of the very few NGOs with the data to follow the results. On health issues, ICM is developing a sizable community health champion network. We train one poor lady from every community to lead the local health efforts. We give that lady a smartphone, we load it with the ICM app, and she has to go around and register all the families in her community, and the app then assigns her tasks. For example, the app might direct the health worker to visit a 6-week-old baby or a pregnant lady, and if she accomplishes all those tasks, she could earn up to $20 per month. So this is a picture of the Domo dashboard that we use to track. Each one of those lines up and down is a single day. And every day our app assigns a few thousand tasks. Cumulatively, our health workers have visited and provided healthcare more than 1 million visits. The data is real time for ICM's management and for our stakeholders like you. We are already providing health care to 115,000 poor people. Soon we're going to be making a few changes, and just for a modest additional cost, we intend to provide even higher quality care to those we serve and to increase the number from 115,000 to 500,000 poor families. At this point, we will also be managing one of the biggest community health worker networks in the world. On a different initiative, ICM is partnering with the Global Fund and with PBSP. The Philippines is one of the countries worst affected by tuberculosis, so to diagnose TB in remote communities, you're supposed to drive an x-ray van up a mountain, and then you line up hundreds of poor people to be screened. And there are existing x-ray vans, at least some of them, but they sometimes struggle to get the poor people to attend, as you might appreciate, but that's where ICM comes in. Last month, ICM ran a pilot. We arranged thousands of x-rays, and 10% of those x-rays came back as abnormal results, and we are now working to get treatment for every one of those persons that had an abnormal x-ray. And if things go well, ICM could facilitate as many as 100,000 x-rays next year. In the coming years, this initiative could save literally thousands of lives, and it could have the result of integrating ICM into local governments more than we've ever done before. On another framework, on education, we just finished the midpoint of a huge randomized control trial on our Family Academy program. The researchers haven't finished their analysis, so they really didn't want us to publicize the results, but if you promise not to tell, here's what they found. They say that when they evaluate most education programs in poor communities, most of the things they evaluate don't work at all. Somebody gives the kids a coloring book, it doesn't do any good. But if some of the best strategies in the world on this kind of education, they generate this much impact. And when they looked at ours, they said we spend so little, they expected to find no impact. But when they looked at ICM's results on phonics and math, they found that our Family Academy generates this much impact. It is twice as much as some of the best strategies. And we spend a fraction of a cost per child. So, on a separate matter, we've also been working with the Department of Education to leverage our coaches to help children reintegrate into in-person learning. Our coaches have worked with 500 schools in the Philippines with 2,500 at-risk children, and DepEd in the Philippines has recognized ICM as one of its top NGO partners. We're also innovating around disaster relief. Last week, the Philippines was rated the #1 worst country in the world for natural disasters, and ICM is ready to respond. As you may recall, if you were here last year, at the start of COVID, nobody was able to do anything. People weren't able to get food. ICM was able to deliver 14 million meals and 300 million vegetable seeds to hungry families. But COVID is not the only natural disaster in this country. In December 2021, Typhoon Odette slammed ICM areas across the Philippines. 2 million people in those areas lost their homes. ICM leveraged our pastor network to deliver millions of meals to overlooked families. We rebuilt 600 churches. We also launched a trauma healing program, similar to like cognitive behavioral therapy, and we took more than 100,000 family members through a 6-week program to resolve trauma they experienced from the typhoon. And so far, our data indicates that families feel more empowered to take charge of their own futures, and that should impact their long-term results. On another area on values, ICM is innovating there too. Before COVID, we had 3,000 pastors that were attending a full day of ICM training every month. At the time, we believed that was a huge network. And when COVID came, they had to shut it all down because nobody could move around. And we thought if we could just keep our Thrive network at that old level after COVID, then we would have been thrilled. But when COVID started to ease, we changed from having 3,000 pastors every month to 10,000 pastors every month. We tripled our network from before COVID. I got to say, we are stunned at that size. And we are about to leverage on that by launching a big program with CCF to bring a full year of training to this entire pastor network during 2023. The World Evangelical Alliance just invited Deanna and I to Austria last month to present ICM's research, and I suspect that will lead to productive partnerships as well. So it feels like ICM has cutting-edge approach on a whole variety of arenas. And in the development world, the livelihood experts, they very rarely speak to the health experts, and the disaster experts very rarely speak to the education experts. But at ICM, we believe in a holistic reaction approach to ultra poverty, and so it looks like we have a place at the table at each of these arenas. Now, encouraged by these results, ICM has expanded our footprint. We aim, and we have said this from the beginning, we aim to be in every single village in the Visayas and Mindanao so that every ultra-poor person in those areas will be connected to the ICM ecosystem. And we're getting closer here. 5 years ago, we had just over 400 full-time staff. Then COVID hit, and we nearly doubled our staff to now we have nearly 800 full-time staff. 5 years ago, we were helping about 100,000 poor people per year, and now we're reaching more than 250,000 people every year. And we've expanded dramatically. We've already reached these areas on the map. We are launching a new campaign, and we think 5 years from now, we hope that we will be able to complete the task. We've been bowled over by the results of our international pilots. In Uganda, we are now in our 6th batch of Transform. We have 33 full-time Ugandans working for ICM. The results of Transform in Africa are often even more dramatic than they are in the Philippines. In Uganda, we already have graduated 25,000 family members. We have started 130 savings groups. 98% of those savings groups are still active today. The Ugandans, those poor Ugandans, they have less cash than the Filipinos. They have already saved $130,000 of their own money. In Africa, our data indicates that Transform improves drinking water, hand washing, it reduces severe hunger. And in just a few weeks, we're in Central America. We are graduating more than 1,000 family members from our very first full Transform program in Guatemala. We have hired a dozen ICM staff in Guatemala. Honestly, not all of them speak English, but they are so excited to be part of their very first banquet. So they gathered this morning together before dawn, and they are joining us live. ICM is also we're hoping to expand into 4 or 5 more countries in the next few years. We are considering Cambodia, Madagascar, South Sudan, Burundi, maybe even India. Our objective is to prove that the poverty reduction strategy that was birthed here in Hong Kong and the Philippines can reduce poverty all over the world. But still, 95% of ICM's budget is focused on the Philippines. Our programs in the Philippines are so huge, we don't expect that ratio to change much. We are all about scale. So, when you hear all of that, how do you react to all of those innovations? And honestly, it's just a portion of what's happening at ICM. You add all those innovations up, you combine decades of relentless execution, means more than 1 million lives have already been impacted, and millions more are going to be changed in the future. So, was it worth it for me to walk away from business for the last decade? Absolutely. I don't feel like I've sacrificed much. I feel honored to be here. Of course, I've had a hand in crafting those strategies, but I didn't do it by myself. The 10,000 ICM pastors are heroic. The 800 ICM staff, they bring wisdom and passion every day. And I am grateful for many of you tonight, our stakeholders who have trusted us with advice and resources to make a real difference. So as we celebrate ICM's 30 years together, I hope many of you share my gratitude and you understand that the part that you all played to make this happen. When we ran our first Hong Kong banquet, ICM was a fraction of our current size. From those humble beginnings, together we have seen ICM help so many people. Many of you were the ones that gave resources to accomplish all of this. So later in our program, you will hear from our auctioneer, and Christine will thank you from the bottom of her heart. I know she does it every day. And I want you to know that we really mean it. So thank you very much.